started eating a bunch, lifting like crazy, started gaining a bunch of muscle, and started to gain a lot of confidence. And it becomes kind of this monotonous regime where you're just like going in every day to check a box. And like, while you can set goals and lift more and more weight, there becomes this threshold of like, what's next? And I'm sure you can attest to this crossing the finish line in Ironman. That moment is super special, but you can't help but think about the process that led you to that moment. And God talks so much about perseverance produces character, character produces hope. What we are doing is not the purpose. Like the purpose of what we're doing is to glorify God and then to also glorify fellow believers and fellow athletes in the community. And it's to create purpose and change and to love others the best we can.
All right, guys, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for listening today. I'm sitting here with Tyler Walters. We're going to talk about fitness, faith, business, relationships, all the good stuff in between, talk about our 20s and, trying to figure out this thing that we call life that we're all trying to get through. Shout out to today's sponsor, Correct, out of Austin, Texas. These guys make some incredible supplements for really anyone, but like targeted at athletes training for IROCs or Ironmans or like other endurance events. So check them out. But overall, thank you again for coming on. Tyler is just such a beast. We connected through some mutuals not too long ago, I guess maybe like 2 months or so ago here in Texas, and have been going on some runs together on Katy Trail. Have been talking about faith and, how that has kind of changed our lives and, other stuff like Ironmans and the whole world of fitness. He's training for Ironman Texas in April. I'll let you kind of dive into how you're going to accomplish that. But overall, we've just connected in so many different areas where I feel like you kind of just stumble upon those people in your community where you feel like you're kind of going through this period of life where nobody understands kind of where you're at.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you just meet someone and you're like, wait, I was just thinking about that the other day. Like I'm training for an Ironman or I'm, trying to figure out this business that I've been grinding on. I feel like we just clicked on so many different things.
Yes.
So thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Talk about Ironman Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and two, I think to start where we click, like I think it's the vision. I got Levi book the other day, 25 Hours a Day by Nick Bear. And I think the biggest thing, and I've watched a lot of Nick's podcast and Luke Hopkins, and shout out all the BPM guys, but something that Nick talks a lot about is the vision. And I think that when you and I came across each other, I just noticed such a intertwinedness in the vision and in that, but enrolling into the Ironman. So I was going to sign up for Little Island here in Dallas. We have a 70.3 in our backyard this year, but apparently a lot of people want to do it. So it got booked out pretty quick. And so had to look about a month out, and Ironman Woodlands is on the calendar, and just kind of figured I've done some sprints and Olympic distances now, and I'll get into kind of what propelled me to get into triathlons rather than marathons or half marathons and everything. And also doing High Rocks Houston, which is in March. So yeah, that'll be super exciting. Going to do doubles again, and hopefully,
Let's go.
me and my partner don't cramp up on lap 8 this time.
What has been like the biggest event that you've done so far? And like how much work do you think you're gonna have to put in for this?
It'll be a lot. It'll be a lot. As you can attest, I mean, it's no joke.
You've been grinding.
Yeah, I've been averaging between 40 to 45 miles a week, running, lifting 3 days a week, and still biking 2 days a week. The swim has just been completely lackluster.
Yeah.
And so that's where trying to find a pool, we've been talking about Cowboys fitness and trying to find a pool where we can swim frequently. And so, yeah, it's going to be a grind. And I think, so I've done 2 sprints. I've done an Olympic distance as well. For those listening, a sprint is what, 1/8 of an Ironman, and then an Olympic is 1/4 of an Ironman. So a half would be a half Ironman.
You'll jump right into the big boy.
Yeah. So yeah, just really right now, I'm just trying to get my body in shape. Running 40 to 50 miles a week, just trying to get the cardio up, obviously, and biking as well. And I've worked with Jenny Fletcher as well. She's a great coach here in Dallas. And the biggest thing that she taught me was, and this is why I need to get the pool sooner than later, looking for an indoor pool, is that biking and running is obviously great cardiovascular activity, but it doesn't necessarily translate to swimming because it's so technique based. You can get the most jacked guy. I mean, it's kind of like running and biking as well. You take the most jacked guy, but you put him on a bike or put some running shoes on him and they don't just start flying. And, I don't know the exact science behind it, but you have to build up white blood cells and your tendons strengthen and your ligaments and joints. And there's just like so much science that goes into it. And that literally just comes from volume. And that's why I think typically on a typical week, I would book like 25 to 30 miles running.
Okay.
But with the woodlands coming out, like it's just a matter of sheer volume, like trying to stay in Zone2 for as long as possible and with as many miles as possible.
Getting in the pool, that is such a hard thing to do. Like out of all workouts that you can possibly do, like biking, there's prep that you got to do with your bike.
Yeah.
Getting it ready and stuff, but it almost makes it easy to like flow into a bike ride. Like running is so easy. You throw on your shoes and go outside on the trail. But swimming is like, there's something about it where like just getting wet. And it's the most uncomfortable thing out of any sport.
I had a panic attack the first time I got in the pool.
Yeah, dude, it's difficult. Like that's the number one cause of heart attacks for Ironmans and half Ironmans. On average, there is 3 to 4 heart attacks / deaths every year just from the swim because your heart rate's so spiked at the start of any race.
Yeah.
And then you're in a tight wetsuit and then you jump in the water's freezing. And so your body goes into shock. And then you're trying to grind, and swimming is so tough. And it's like, I think a lot of people forget that you like sweat like a ton when you're swimming, but you're wet, so you don't even see it. But swimming is so key because it helps with improving your VO2 max, which impacts your biking or running so much, whereas those don't necessarily translate back to swimming as much.
And when I first got into triathlon, specifically training with Jenny Fletcher I wanted to just sign up for like the big race, sign up for Waco 70.3 or just sign up for an Ironman. But as I started watching BVN and following guys, like seeing the sheer amount of volume that goes in every week. I remember I was just lifting at LA, or I was lifting at Lifetime, up from Round Rock and back home. And this guy was wearing an Ironman 70.3 shirt. So I was like, man, like I want to be an Ironman, I'm getting into fitness and stuff. So I was going into college. I was like 6'2", 135. I mean, I was.
Oh my God. What?
Yeah. 6'2", 135.
That would be great if you still weighed that much now.
Yeah.
Because the lighter you are for these rounds, better.
But it wasn't so great for my my confidence, I would say. So
crazy.
Yeah. So I got up.
Weight now.
I'm at about 193, 194.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of, I want to say around 200.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, I just, started eating a bunch, lifting like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so started gaining a bunch of muscle and then started to gain a lot of confidence. And I was listening, I'm probably going to bring up BPM a lot. They're great guys. And I've learned really, truly like BPM is what got me into fitness. And I think that's what's so cool about podcasts is it gives you the ability to share stories, and stories are everything. But Luke Hopkins was talking a lot about, he got into weightlifting, but then it becomes kind of this monotonous regime where you're just like going in every day to check a box. And like, while you can set goals and lift more and more weight, the question becomes, what can you do with your body? And while there's like a certain level of that in the gym where you can continue to set goals and maximize output, just continue to put on weight, there becomes this threshold of like, what's next?
Yeah.
And then so I picked up running my senior year at A&M, and I would just like start running like 2 or 3 miles. I mean, I couldn't do much. I hadn't ran in years. And then as I did it, I started to like hit this barrier every time where I would just like lock into this new zone that like I hadn't experienced weightlifting. And it was like crack. I mean, I just couldn't get enough of it. And so like every morning before my 8 a.m. just getting up. And it wasn't much. It was like 3 or 4 miles. And at that time, that was a huge feat. I mean, everybody now and then the running
That's insane. Yeah.
like
In college, if you run at all, that's
yeah.
insane.
And but then like now our community, it's like, oh, I did 3 miles, like whatever. I mean, you go
So
27 miles on your 27th birthday, just to do that, and then it slowly started to become 5, 6, 7 miles, and it started doing some half marathons, and
this is when you were still a senior.
yes, it was actually so I did a 4+1 program, and I got my master's as well in financial economics, and that kind of goes into my whole story
Yeah.
that we'll get into with career routes and purpose in life. And
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing of wanting to be on a podcast and get the talk is like all about purpose. It's so why we do all this.
Was you getting into running and kind of fitness during that 5th year?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was after
Probably
friends, some of your friends had left already?
Yeah, correct.
I feel like there's like a correlation there.
Yeah.
So I've seen that same thing happen where it's like that 5th year isn't the same as the
It's right. No, and I think there was this element too of like a part of me wanted to extend that 5th year to not grow up a little bit and kind of extend the college life out. And my master's program was paid for through scholarships. And so
Nice.
there wasn't a huge opportunity cost there. If I were to go leave and take a job, I felt like that I wasn't losing as much with not having to pay for grad school. And so, but all of the friends left. I knew some younger guys, and I think there was this part of me that I see half of my friend group going and working a 9 to 5, and then like I'm still stuck in College Station. And I've been lifting pretty frequently for a couple of years, and I just reached this point of like, what can my body do? And it was just those like first few months of just booking 5 miles every day. Quickly realized the importance of cardiovascular activity. I mean, it just exhausting your body. And then I'd go get on the stationary bike, and I would be, every Northgate was the VAR district in our college town, and I'd stay on Friday or Saturday night, and, go book 40 miles on a bike, and just I couldn't even put into words like the level of discipline that like finally clicked in my brain. That's when everything started to change. I just couldn't get enough of it. And like when I moved to Dallas to start working, as soon as the clock hit, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., like I've got my running shoes in the truck and I'm hitting the trail or I'm hitting White Rock Lake. So yeah.
I feel like there's just this population of people out there, one that like haven't discovered that dopamine feeling after running yet. And I wish that I could just like insert that feeling into their heart and like wake them up. Like there's not like, because I feel like my journey is very similar. Like just realize like, how much it changed my life, my mental clarity. They talk about like the 80-20 rule. I noticed that like my work after I would go run in the morning was like spot on. Like that hour after I ran, I get so much done. I still do. Like unless I'm training for an Ironman or something where I'm like dead after. That is always like I'm so sharp. But I wish I could just like share that with the world. And it's such a unique thing because then there's kind of this split in paths where a lot of guys go after school where they kind of, get stuck down the 9 to 5. And obviously there's a million different paths, but I feel like you kind of either go more towards the corporate, post-work happy hour path.
Yeah.
Or you go I don't like, and they love it. Some people just, they don't seem to care about wanting to do anything else. Or you start out in the 9 to 5 and then you're like, what am I doing? Those are the people who are chasing that dopamine high after work.
Yeah.
Right when the clock hits 5. And there's just like that separation and like the two paths. And I feel like, we're both going down this one.
Yeah. I think something that I started to notice, when I was in college, we all did the intramural sports, and, we were all in my friend group, like we kind of had the work hard, play hard mentality. Like we were the guys that were at Northgate, and then we were all 4.0 students, and we worked our tails off, and and then we started to do intramurals, and so you have that sense of competitiveness that's still there that you carry on from high school sports. Because I just think as a guy who's extremely ambitious and who's extremely competitive, you have to have something in your life that you're chasing, some sort of goal. And when I got to Dallas and I just was working my 9 to 5, I think that there's a lot of people nowadays that are like, quit your job and like go be an entrepreneur without really understanding like what that entails. And 80% of millionaires all have a college degree. And so there's like a level of output that comes from doing the hard stuff, like going to college, getting a degree. And everybody wants to sit around the table and argue, what is the point of college? You know, is it truly worth it? Is it a scam? But I do think that there's something to be said about the sweat equity that comes out of it. You know, the all-nighters studying for finals and the 3 a.m.s. And that's a big lesson that I learned is, and I'm sure you can attest to this crossing the finish line in Ironman. It's like in that moment when I've crossed finish lines, not only in triathlons or when you walk the stage at graduation, that moment is super special, but you can't help but think about the process that led you to that moment. And so once I graduated, you know, I was working my 9 to 5 and there's really no like finish line anymore. I'm just like, the process is beautiful in a sense of like going to your job and working a 9 to 5. And I would say every day I got home, like, I quickly was like, that's gonna be awesome. Like I get a paycheck. Like I'm gonna get like,
the money's nice.
yeah. I was like, you know, at the time I was getting like 3 grand every 2 weeks. I was like, this is the most money I've ever seen in my entire life. But as you get into it, you also realize that you go from College Station, Texas, where rent is $600 in a house that's built 1960 with your buddies, and all you pay for is, you know, food and $50 in gas a month. That's really it. You know, rec center's covered and everything. And you go to Dallas and, you know, rent's $1,500 and, you know, I'm paying for car insurance. And so it's like, you see this number every week, but then it's like, man, how much is like it really going to me? And then you start to really reflect on like, am I doing what I want to do every day? And we've talked about this a lot. Like I'm still in corporate. And I texted you today and just said, maybe one day, dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, for real.
One day, you know, I can't wait for the moment. Right? Like my story's different, but like I know that God has me where I'm at right now. Cause I think there's an element too of like taking calculated risk when it's time to take that risk. But kind of circling back, that was the big thing. It was like, I'm in my 9 to 5, just grinding every day. And there's no finish line. And I was like, I need something outside of work or I'm truly going to go crazy. I need something where I can like kind of escape before work, after work, and kind of just be alone and be present. Cause I felt like throughout the work day and then, you know, if you're in a relationship or you know, you're hanging out with your friends afterwards, like there wasn't that moment of pause where I'm just with myself with, you know, if you're a believer of Christ, like if you're just with Christ in that moment to like truly regroup. Yeah. And that's what I felt. What do I want to do with my life? Yeah. What is, and that's the question I started asking myself every single day. It was like, you know, in elementary school, my purpose is to make my parents proud and to have fun with my friends and to play sports. And then middle school is like, you know, maybe I got my first girlfriend or again, sports still and, you know, college football and playing Call of Duty with your buddies. And, you know, high school again is, you know, now where am I going to go to college? And there's always something else. And, you know, where am I going to go to college? Who are my friend groups at this new place? What sport should I play now? Because everybody kind of plays basketball, football, baseball, and then it kind of starts to get more defined. And I played golf, so don't hate on me too much, but I loved golf. And there was something, I think I discovered something about myself. And this is kind of why I got into triathlon training is like I can isolate extremely easily. And everybody has their opinion on isolation. But for me, like when I'm in isolation, it creates this level of discipline, you know, that like I can't even explain it with words. Like when I just get alone and I'm on the bike or I'm in the pool or, you know, I'm cranking out 7 8 miles. There's something in when I'm in that zone. And I was reading this book recently and it's called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And it's this idea that throughout the day, we have 8 to 10,000 thoughts that just flutter through the brain. We just have thoughts all day. And a thought, for example, could be, okay, the weather's bad outside. And then thinking on that thought could go to 2 different avenues. And one would be, okay, well now my day is ruined, or oh, this is going to be a great day. And so I found myself with all of these thoughts, you know, your insecurities and your pursuit of like, am I making enough money? And, you know, maybe I'm single right now and want to be in a relationship. I'm in a relationship and I'm like worrying about the future. And am I with the right friend group? And like for me, I had so much anxiety and worry about my career path. there's a reason, and we'll get into it here in a bit, of like why I chose finance. I'm like, am I going to make enough money? Is, my future spouse like going to be okay with that level of income? Should I forego that level of income and choose to go be a high school golf coach? Like there's all of these different things. And so I finally discovered reading that book and then like coming to my faith more than really anything is that I had to figure out like how to warp my thoughts into something productive. And I don't, and again, it's one of those things that surpasses human understanding. Like when I'm running, it makes everything so clear in those 5 a.m., 6 a.m. runs. The mental clarity that you get on those thoughts is just truly fascinating. And then the book later goes on to talk about the flow state. And when I was reading the book, I thought a lot about running, biking, and swimming in the flow state, or, even on like a 9 to 5, you'll have like those 2 or 3 hours, or like you don't talk to your coworkers, just locked in at the Excel sheet. And you're in that flow state. And it's like what I think his name was Josh Winnan. Correct me if I'm wrong, audience, if I get it wrong, but he's talking about this flow state, and psychologists call it the flow state. And it's this state where your autonomic nervous system, like, it just goes into like hyperdrive, and it's just you and that goal, and you can't even think, and it's like the most beautiful thing. And while I was reading that, I thought about obviously triathlons, but then I thought back to why did I make the switch? Because I think this is super interesting to note. I went from all of these team sports. I played baseball for 10 years. I wasn't very big in high school, so basketball and football kind of like got thrown out of the equation. But I went to golf, and there was something about like going out and playing nine early in the morning, like when the dude's coming up, or going out and walking 36 on Saturday with your buddies, of like something about being in that flow state. Like they would ask us if we wanted cards. We're like, no, like, we're maybe times maybe carry our bags or whatever. But there was something about like, when you start off, you're nervous, but like once you get to holes like 7 through 13 and you're like 1 or 2 under, you just like start to get into this state. And like I'd be playing tournaments, and we had a pretty good golf team, made it to regionals a few times, and 6A, like playing with the big dogs, Westlake and Lake Travis. And we were like the guys from Ravenok that just like goofed off and somehow played with like the guys who were all country club kids, and we just like picked up clubs when we were in 7th grade. But like whenever my team got in that flow state, like nobody can mess you up. Like it's just like you, and that's what's so beautiful too about Ironmans and marathons and all this stuff. It's like there's something about that flow state that like kind of resets you. So,
Well, I think yeah. I mean, it's different types of people, and I don't mean to keep on going back to like saying corporate versus like an entrepreneur, but I think there is a very direct correlation between those two types of people. Like I want to say that people that are more accustomed to, or that fit in more to like the corporate world, where it's very collaborative, very like team focused, very not as like deep in thought, I think, that it requires to be an entrepreneur and start a business. And like those types of people are the ones who really love that flow state. Yeah. They love being able to take on something by themselves. And like, talking about finding that when you went into golf, and like I think I've always known that I'm like an individual sport kind of person. Yeah. Like I never loved team sports. I played baseball, but like I was a pitcher. I loved like being in control. Yeah. And like I didn't like it when I was standing out in the outfield. I was like, this isn't me. I liked being in control. And so again, that's why I fell in love with triathlon, because it was, a step up from just running. I think I really enjoy, honestly, like the stress that comes with a triathlon and having to manage all the different gear and these 3 different disciplines. And like it lit me up a lot more than when I was just doing running. Yeah. But then it is something that it's you versus you, and it allows you to hit that flow state like nothing I've ever experienced, especially like, on the bike, or like when you're swimming, or you just get into this mindset where you almost black out, and it's just you kind of like channeling that last 6 months of work. Yeah. And it just filters through your head, probably all 10,000 thoughts at once, and it's like you kind of give yourself chills. Like when you're like, I don't know if you've experienced that, but like I've been running on Katy Trail, and I'm like in the moment recognizing like how impactful it is that like in that moment I'm, becoming 1% better, and I like give myself the chills, like inspiring myself that I'm running. Yeah. But I love what you're talking about with the two different, like, thoughts that come after each thought. And like there's two different directions that you can take. And I do think that a lot of people struggle with that, where they kind of go down this one path. And I feel like there's part of that, you're born with. There's part that, your family and your friends and all that have kind of impacted. But like being in a community of guys that are like confident, building businesses, like working towards their fitness, like whatever it may be, that will rewire those paths. Because I can say with absolute certainty, like I don't know what my life is going to look like in 10 years, but I know for a fact that I'm going to make, a lot of wrong decisions still, but I'm going to make way more of those where it is sunny outside, even though or it's raining. That means I can go around in the rain and be gritty and, have a challenge as opposed to being so nice and sunny, and like train your brains. It's a muscle, like do the hard thing. But that's an interesting topic because I feel like that is something that isn't really talked enough about, but like that's what causes people to kind of like have some mental health issues. And that's what anxiety is. Being at work, sitting at your desk, and you get one thought, like you scroll on Instagram and you see some dude traveling and having the best life. And then you're like, what am I doing here? And then you make all these other thoughts turn into, okay, I got to turn my life around, which is good. But it's just crazy that happens to us every single day. And you have to be locked in every single day because nobody's coming to save you. It's you and the world. That's it.
It's so funny. Things you're saying are things that I remind myself. I'm about to post on Instagram from High Rocks and I was being commented, you versus you. And
You versus you.
and nobody's coming to save you. Like at the lowest points of my life, you think that you just wait. You're like, okay, maybe it's the next job or the next relationship or the next event, like whatever it may be. And you have to just wake up one day and you're like, nobody's coming to save me. And I have to, when I've gotten 4 hours of sleep and the alarm goes off at 5 a.m., And so, and something I wanted to add too is something that I think is so interesting too is there's all of this pop culture talk on like follow your heart, whether it's relationship or job or like friendships or like whatever it may be, whatever niche of life. And something that the lead pastor at a church here in Dallas taught me was that your feelings, your thoughts, feelings, and actions are almost like a cycle, and everything depends off of the previous action. So, and this is why putting into your brain either positive psychology, positive affirmation, and also the best book there ever was written is the Bible, of putting those thoughts into your mind. And in the New Testament, Jesus talks about like taking your thoughts captive. And so like when your brain starts to spiral or go into overdrive, reminding yourself of truth is like the most important thing, whether it's relationship, career route, Ironman training. And that's where the you versus you kind of comes in. I'm like some of the, I remember my first half marathon, like I was not ready, honestly, but I just did it.
Yeah.
I'm like, everything was shutting down. Like my legs are cramping. Like I'm tired. I didn't take enough pickle juice shots. Like I just, everything was like just falling apart. And I could just like feel myself wanting to quit. And I just kept telling myself, like, dude, you worked so hard for this. Like if you quit now, like imagine all the people at the finish line. And again, it's just a half marathon, but like at the time it was this huge deal to me because it's like my first event. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what BPM was. I didn't even really know what triathlon was. And like everything in my body is like shut down, shut down, shut down. And I just went into this state of like truth. And I was like, the truth is I'm not quitting. Like somebody would have to carry me off in a stretcher for me to quit. Like it was some like podunk half marathon in the hills of Austin. There was like 100 people.
Nobody's watching. Yeah.
But like to me, this was like the Super Bowl. I mean, I was like, this is everything. And so my thoughts had my thoughts just been negative self-talk or like thoughts from the enemy, like it would have just been so easy to shut down. And there's so many different moments in life. Like again, bring up relationships and career and family and all of these different niches. It all kind of like sums into one bucket of allowing your thoughts to then motivate your heart and your feelings. A lot of people just think that their emotions are just random. They think that they just like pop up. And there's certain things like triggers, like certain environments that you're in, certain smells, certain songs. Like there's definitely triggers of emotions, but for the most part, we are able to control our emotions. The Bible talks about, says, the man without self-control is like a city without, it's like a city with broken walls. And then, so the ability to take your thoughts captive, that then, as he explained it to me, is a cycle. So everything starts with your thoughts, and then that then flows into your heart. And then your heart then flows into action, and then action then flows into outcome.
Mhm.
And so when he explained it to me that way, I realized that my whole life, I thought everything was just, in psychology, they call it SRO, stimuli, response, outcome. I just kind of lived my entire life like, oh, stimuli, like I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. I'm tired, I'm going to sleep. I'm bored, I'm going to text a friend. I'm extremely bored, I'm going to go take my car and drive as fast as I can. But I'm 17 years old, get an adrenaline rush. Or, I'm going to go, it's sunny outside, I'm going to go fish with my buddies. And like, I never thought, like, why? Do you awareness? Yeah. Yeah. So I had no awareness. And that is like when everything changed. Not just that conversation, but like, I've always been extremely introspective. And I think about, this sounds gruesome, but I do think about death frequently. And like when you see death around you, and I've had some acquaintances throughout high school and college pass away. And it's in those moments where you stop and reflect and like, if none of us know when the clock is going to end. And if that was tomorrow, am I living the life that I want to be talked about at my funeral? And did I bring everybody with me to heaven that I want to? And so I just became extremely introspective throughout college. And that's kind of what fueled the marathons. And I'll kind of get into too, how I kind of started to get burnout too with Ironman or with triathlon training, and kind of like where my purpose is now with why I do what I do. Because I think it's also dangerous to put all of your marbles into something that could be even healthy, like marathon training or Ironman training. So like if all of your eggs are in one basket on running for a marathon and you break your leg the next day, you're going to fall into
It's your identity. You can't make
like,
identity in something like that.
and so that's where I started to struggle. And I have a lot of buddies who will text me like, hey, what does it look like to run? Like, how far do I run? Or they'll just like start asking me faith questions. And I always tell certain guys, like, okay, before you give your faith up, just like start waking up early, start running, like go to the gym every day, get healthy, just to like build that discipline muscle. I think in a way that like prepares them to like get ready for like what it's like with a walk with God, because it's like anything else, like it's up and down and it's not linear. But yeah, and I don't know how we would get into all of this, but I had a lot of troubles growing up, and those created like deep insecurities in me. And I tried to fill those voids with everything under the sun, like any and there's this parable in the Bible. It's called the parable of the prodigal son. There's two sons. One son remains like super faithful to his father, and the other one remains extremely unfaithful. Yeah. He wanders off. He spends his entire inheritance, and he realizes what he's done, and he was like, "Shoot, like I got to go back to my dad." Yep. And so he comes back to his dad, broken and, just completely ashamed. And he just squanders off his entire inheritance. And when he comes back, and his dad just welcomes him up in open arms. And he gives him the fattened calf because he had faith in his father. And the son that actually stayed home and did everything he was supposed to got nothing. And a lot of people forget about that. And the parable of the prodigal son is like the son who just stayed home and just followed orders just to do it. Yeah. It didn't get anything. And so I was the prodigal son. Like I tried everything under the sun, partying and just all of these reckless things, like any dopamine high. Like I've tried it. And it's a huge part of my testimony that I share very frequently, is serving at a church here in Dallas. Of like, I went down this avenue of like, because I've had extremely, extremely difficult hardships growing up in the most transformative years of life, I tried to fill that void with everything I could possibly think of. And then I came across weightlifting and running, and like even that gave me purpose. But at the end of the day, like when you put your head on the pillow, you get a really good workout in, but eventually like that wears off. And those are like, yes, it's super healthy for you. And I'll go to my deathbed and say, working out is very healthy for you. And it's something you should do. But then I went down this path of like prioritizing that. And I was like, okay, this is my purpose. But eventually those endorphins wear off and it's just you and your thoughts alone at night when you put your head on the pillow and then you wake up. It's again, it's, you're alone in your thoughts. And then, okay, I was like, well, I'm going to run 5 miles. Okay, I checked it off. Well, now I'm going to run 10 miles and checked it off. Well, then I'm going to do a half marathon and check it off. I'm going to do a full marathon. And it was like this process of like, what's next, what's next, what's next. And I lived my whole life like that with money and partying and relationships and just like this domino effect of like trying to chase the next high.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do a sprint marathon or a sprint triathlon, you do an Olympic. And then now I'm going for an Ironman. And it's like, there's all of these extremely ambitious things, which don't get me wrong are good. But I think, and like Nick Barry started to talk about his faith a lot more openly too. Like, and I think a lot of guys in the community are starting to recognize that, like, yes, it's extremely healthy to build that muscle and to be extremely ambitious. And like, as men, we're created to be ambitious and to chase ambitious goals. But if you place your identity in that, the question is always going to be, what's next? And so I think, guys like Nick Bear and guys like, Cameron Haynes and some of these guys, like they do the 100, and I don't know if Goggins, where he's at, his faith journey, but like do the 100 mile and then you do the 150 and do 200 miles and your meniscus are rubbing against each other and you don't have a kneecap and you're, blood's pouring down your leg. Like that is like the most purposeful thing that you could do in this world. But I started to ask myself that question of like chasing all these things and then eventually chasing something which is deemed healthy. And it is of chasing, triathlons, marathons, and all of this awesome stuff. But then like I crossed that finish line and I think about the process and I was like, man, that was beautiful. But like, what is it about that process? What does that say? And then so I just started getting into the word and God talks so much about perseverance produces character, character produces hope. And I can quote so much scripture, but just essentially going to this idea that like we are called as men as well as women to suffer in this world. And because if you could suffer chasing the dopamine highs, I've done it all, the drinking, partying, the video games, the adrenaline rush. I saved my money at my first car. We drove about 150 miles an hour. True story. Going up to the F1 race in Austin, I was like, I'm just going to bore it. But like the adrenaline course, and then this was on like, I-35 goes south to San Antonio, but there's a toll road. It's the fastest speed limit in America. It's 85. And we were racing and a McLaren and a Cadillac pulled up to the 2 lanes next to us. And like my buddy, when we were 16 years old, so let it out. It was like, y'all ready to race? And so I lost. I had like a little cooped up Infiniti G35. But I guess where I'm kind of like navigating through all that is I think I'm at this place now. I think, I don't know if we've talked about this, but you may say this too, because you're starting to accomplish all of these things. And, you just ripped Ironman California the other day. And it's like, man, and I'm so curious to hear too, like your reflection on that, when you cross the line, when Emily's there and friends are there, when they do it with you, I can only imagine the emotions that come up from that. But then you cross the line and there's probably a few days of reflection on it that like, man, that was awesome. And thinking about the process too, like all of the hours when nobody was watching, you're on your rooftop lifting weights, you're on the bike, nobody's there, you're on stationary bike at 5:30 a.m. sweating and you want to quit. All those moments are beautiful, but then like time goes on and it's like, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's so important for guys in this space, like while it is the healthiest thing you can do, to constantly remind themselves of what we are doing is not the purpose. Like the purpose of what we're doing is to glorify God and then to also glorify fellow believers and fellow athletes in the community. And it's to create purpose and change and God is love and to love others the best we can. And so that's the way I see it. And like with this podcast and with doing an Ironman, like I want to glorify God and